Hello, and welcome again to the third edition of the Generations. In the last two episodes, I described the first two generations, starting in 1927 when Uranus went into the sign of Aries. The 14-year period had Uranus going into Taurus, Pluto in Cancer, while Neptune occupied Virgo. This was the Depression babies that tended to soften Saturn or the father's role in the family. Second, or flower child generation, spanned the years including 1942 to about 1956. This had Uranus in Gemini and Cancer, while Pluto shifted into Leo and Neptune into Libra. This generation changed the world in their rhetoric, along with the birth of the women's liberation movement. The third generation saw the shift of the planets happening around 1956 and lasted to about 1970 and marked the Gothic generation. Pluto enters Virgo while Neptune occupied Scorpio and Uranus is in Leo, followed by Virgo, leading to the conjunction that marked the irreversible shift in the 60s. The first half had Uranus in Leo in square aspect to Neptune in Scorpio. This is Samson after his loss his strength. This would be in the yin portion of the Leo script. These are the children of the Depression babies that wanted to be the child's friend, leaving them over-nurtured, creating a dependence on the nurturers at the expense of their self-esteem and their creativity. We are seeing a trend regarding the awakening of Uranus. In Aries and the Depression babies, it awakened the sensitive male that didn't want to be the isolated father archetype. Instead, he wanted a closer connection to his children, leading to an over-nurtured child. Uranus is breaking the patriarchal structure in its attempt to equalize the sexes. The forces of fire are the target. With Uranus in Leo, we see the forces of fire dimming as Scorpio puts out its flame. The late 50s were Eisenhower's do-nothing years. The witch hunt ended and people were wooed to sleep while their government decided the ends justified the means and started covert operations on a grand scale. The U.S. looked bad when they were discovered spying on Russia. The forces of darkness got an early start in the space race with Sputnik. Samson was taking it on the chin. Interesting, there been a sharp decline in heroes in the field of science, government, and with the exception of music, the arts. The sign of Virgo is the target for the energy of Pluto to run its cycle. The parent generation goes to the max in the Virgo energy, while the children become their opposite, Pisces in this case. The parents are the Depression babies and had to become the critic while the children became the poet, lost in illusion. During these times, perfection was the goal. Whose yard is the prettiest? Recall the Depression babies were the halfies. Then the half sided with the World War II gang, while the others sided with the flower child and be a voice for change. The Virgo script is neither yang nor yin. There is an equilibrium between Virgo and Pisces. This tug of war remains today, 60 years later, as the U.S. and the world is divided into two, the liberals and the conservatives. The country has suffered from gridlock with nothing ever getting done except endless money for war. How can children compete and outshine the previous generation? By the time they entered the counterculture scene, it was poisoned in disillusionment. They had to become the opposite. Where the flower child was seeking higher consciousness leading to God, they chose the punk route and the dark forces of the Gothic. Neptune and Scorpio asked the question, what is the illusion of sex and other death experiences? censorship all but disappeared, allowing children to be exposed to violence and sex through the magic of TV. Experiencing sex at an early age led to many negative experiences. Many began to see the illusion of sex, and it emerged into an athletic event. They saw the negative side of the hippie and joined the yuppies in their pursuit of wealth. They supplied the magic of Virgo in bringing spirit down to earth in the consciousness of making money. They made the choice to forego the warrior and the campaign to fight evil, but to have a perfect life on the physical plane. Saturn spent a lot of time in Capricorn calling for becoming responsible and lessons dealing with the father role. Saturn's role in Aquarius gave them lessons on the negative side of the hippie. They embraced Reagan and the birth of the conservative movement that swept the U.S. The passage of Uranus into Virgo and its conjunction with Pluto marked the explosion that took place in the mid to late 60s. Since both of these planets moved slowly, their conjunction was within orbs such that most of these years had this conjunction. As mentioned, Pluto and Virgo had the World War II gang going to the max regarding creating a perfect world on the physical plane, while their children became their opposite and became the Pisces and the poet. Saturn was in Pisces, making an opposition. Uranus brought enlightenment to both extremes. The result was a splitting of a nation into two, creating conditions for a revolution. At that time, it was easy to tell who was on whose side. The older generation looked outwardly clean with old-fashioned belief systems within. The younger generation took the streets in impure exterior, long hair, etc., while having a pure interior. They were striving to gather in peaceful demonstrations against the war. The Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968 was when the police were allowed to riot, causing serious injuries to the protesters. 2 years later, they murdered students demonstrating at Kent State University. Woodstock in 1969 was the last hurrah for the movement. Everything changed with the planets, creating the next generation. The opposition of Virgo to Pisces is highlighted in this subgroup. The children would have the conjunction in the house that would seriously affect all the scripts. Neptune and Scorpio in the cusp of the third house in this script deals with the synthesis, whereby the Virgo can cut away the impurities within the Gemini mind. Saturn in Pisces in opposition to the explosive Virgo demands confrontation between the poet and the critic. The illusion of death experiences, Neptune and Scorpio, would be in the second half of the cycle, meaning that disillusionment is settling in, particularly with sex. The dyad between Virgo and Pisces deals with the movement of spiritual energy. The Virgo strives to sort spiritual energy to see what fits and cut away that which doesn't, in accordance with certain belief systems. The Pisces strives to find new belief systems so as to absorb the spiritual energy in totality. These children would choose one side and try to project it onto the other. Saturn will have a hand in the projection. They will have many lessons requiring what they project. In some cases, it could be dangerous. We now have 4 generations to consider. The World War II generation and half of the Depression babies would be the conservatives, yearning for the world of 1945, where it was clear who was the good guys. The remaining Depression babies and the Flower Child generation became the anti-establishment and lead the fight for change. The Gothic generation, born during this hectic times, would strive to be the opposite of the Flower Child and embrace the yuppie movement that worships money. Around 1970, Neptune embraced Sagittarius while Pluto went into Libra, while Uranus occupies Libra and then Scorpio and marked Generation X, which will be discussed in the next session. So stay tuned. Until then, be happy.